Alright, 1, 2, 3. You're watching.
All together or just you?
Together, yeah.
Okay,
okay.
alright. Use that, by the way.
Alright, 1, 2, 3.
You're watching MMAnytt.
Score! Alright, welcome back to Studio MMA. I am joined here by MMA Plus's Chamatkar Sandhu. Hope the pronunciation was alright.
Absolutely correct.
And MMA Junkies John Morgan. Perhaps you've heard of him.
You know what? This is the only show I've ever done where I was bought a beer in order to sit down and do it, and I like your style. I like your style. I love this show. I may move to Sweden just to be a part of this every week.
Yeah, take note, people at home. That's straight from the mouth of John Morgan. And besides, we had to get you on our show somehow, so we figured it was a good way to bribe you.
That is the perfect way. Everybody around the world, take note. You need me on your show? Just buy beer. I'm there. I'm there.
Simple but effective. All right, so gentlemen, we are here in Stockholm. We've all traveled. I'm not from here, but yeah, we've all traveled to Stockholm for UFC Fight Night 53, Nelson versus Story. First of all, I've been asking all the Swedish fans this, so I want to get your guys' take on it as well. A lot of Swedish fans have been critical of the card. They're saying it's a weak card. They're saying it's not a lot of big names. That it's not like the first UFC Sweden card. It was very well received. What are your guys' opinions and takes on this?
I mean, obviously, I think people are going to gripe right away because they don't have Alexander Gustafsson, right? I mean, you don't have the big #1 Swedish star, so that's understandable. But, you know, overall, I think there are some fun fights on the card, and there are, what, 6 Swedes on the card in total, and I think that's a great thing to think. I mean, who would have thought a few short years ago there'd be 6 Swedes fighting in the UFC, you know? And I think that's fantastic to see. You know, these cards, and it's tough. I mean, it's a doubleheader. You know, there's a card in Canada later the same day. It's very, very difficult to get the attention and the type of star power that you might want on every single card, but these cards are necessary to develop the market. I mean, you look at the Polish guys that are coming in, look at the Russian fighters that are coming in here. I think this is a really cool card to see, like, the development of the region and the development of the European scene.
I agree. I mean, you know, my theory coming into this card was the fact that all year long we had this talk about Gustafsson versus Jones, this big stadium show here in Sweden, and the fans here in Sweden didn't get that, you know, but instead they got Rick Story and Gunnar Nelson, and maybe that's why it's playing on their minds a little bit. Maybe they're a little bit underwhelmed, but you can never judge a card until it happens, until the fights take place. And we have some amazing fights taking place on Saturday night. Like John said, some great Russian fighters. The Polish are in the house. The Irish are in the house. And I think there will be some very competitive fights.
England coming strong. We got the England invasion over it.
Yeah. From England. I am, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure most people back home have already seen, but there's a huge group of Scott Askham fans who are actually sitting behind the camera at the moment, all up in their Crusader gear.
Yes.
And I like that you quoted Dana White pretty much. Don't judge a card before it takes place. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, speaking of the British, you've got Scott Askham here. Scott Askham, if anyone doesn't know much about him, he's never lost a round in his entire pro career. Yeah. You know,
faces Magnus Cedenblad on the undercard.
And he's got, like you said, the English Crusaders are here, you know, in costume and all, and it's kind of nice to see, actually, because I think as of late, you know, everyone's been accustomed to seeing the Irish invasion, and now we finally got the English invasion here in Stockholm.
Yeah, very true, very true. Now, let's get some predictions. We're all very experienced when it comes to MMA. We've been to a lot of UFC events, and let's start with we'll do the main card, top to bottom. So let's start with Nicholas Bäckström against Mike Wilkinson, featherweight bout. Let's start with John.
I'm really excited to see this fight. Obviously, the weigh-in today, how great was that, man? Yeah. Those guys were fired up. I mean, there's some real energy. Obviously, there's been some trash talking going back and forth. But, you know, put all that aside. I mean, a little bit of emotion makes the fight fun. But put all that aside, I'm really excited to see Bäckström. You know, I haven't got to see him up close and personal, and a lot of hype behind this guy. And I think rightfully so. He looks like the real deal. I'm going to go ahead and pick Bäckström in this fight. I think he's going to be a little bit too much for Wilkinson. But one of the fights on the card I'm really looking the most forward to. There was some energy up there on the stage.
I have to agree. And I think of all the fights on the entire card, this is the fight that's got the most meat and juice behind it. They've gone back and forth. Bäckström said that Wilkins is going to need a superhuman performance to defeat him, whereas Bäckström needs a normal performance to beat him. But speaking to Wilkins this year, he is so hungry for this. You know, being out for over a year, he's battled with injury and depression and even alcoholism, you know, so he's been through so much, and he is so pumped and he's so excited to finally get a chance to show the UFC fans what he's capable of. I think it'll be very, very competitive, but I do have to say I think Bäckström's going to defeat Wilkinson. I think we saw a great Bäckström performance on short notice earlier on this year, and I think now that he's got a full camp behind him, I think we're just going to see an even better performance out of him.
And I want to get method, by the way. You both picked Bäckström, but what method?
John?
He's going to tap him out.
Tap him out?
Yeah.
I agree, submission. Maybe in the second round.
Okay, I have him winning by TKO, actually.
Alright,
First or second round. But, I mean, you guys can't forget his excellent knockout over Max Koga.
Yep.
Front kick, basically, he channeled his inner Anderson Silva.
He's the whole package. He's the whole package, definitely.
And a great character, by the way. A great character. I think Sweden needs more characters like him to break through. You know, I think Swedish people in general, you know, as you are yourself, you can be very laid back and reserved, and you know, it's hard to kind of break through and have that it factor and have some sort of character and person and even show it. And I think Bäckström being one of the characters this week that's really shone through in Fight Week.
I've actually heard him described as a Swedish Conor McGregor. It might be a bit early for that, but might be overstepping a bit. But you know, maybe we'll see. We'll see how far he can go.
The personality's there. I agree. I mean, that's an apt description as far as the flair that he brings to it. So I'll go with it.
All right. Next up on the card is my homeboy from Malmo, down the south, Ilir Latifi, who welcomes Jan Blachowicz to the UFC. Sandu, what do you think about this fight?
Well, I have to say, seeing Jan Blachowicz up front and up close for the first time this week, he's a big guy. He looks in great shape, and being a former KSW champion, they're a legit organization in Poland. Having said that, though, Ilir Latifi this year has been on an absolute tear. He's looked better and better every time he's come out. He had a great performance in London, had a great performance in Dublin, and I think the European tour's going to round out with another great performance, and I think he's going to beat Jan by a TKO or a knockout.
Yeah. What round?
Maybe in the second round.
Yeah. Okay. John?
You know, it's funny. I came to Sweden feeling pretty confident in Ilir Latifi. I had not stood next to Jan before, and I you know, being that man is a specimen, and it looks to be in great physical condition. You know, long reach on him as well. So I think this is going to be perhaps a better fight than I originally thought it was going to be. I'm still going to stick with my pick of Ilir Latifi. I think maybe a late TKO, perhaps grinding out a decision. I see him kind of, you know, again, you mentioned the improvement that he's shown. I mean, the guy came into such a difficult situation in his UFC debut, and it was hard not to feel emotional. I remember the press conference afterwards, you know, after the loss, and I actually asked Dana White, hey, you're going to give him another shot, right? And Dana said yes, and everybody clapped and applauded for him. And, like, how could you not? I mean, the dude had just given his heart. So it's been great to see Ilir come back with 2 wins since then, and really, again, looks to be improving, looks to be getting better, and show what he's capable of. And I think this is going to be another fight where he shows the improvements that he's made. But I will say this, man, don't sleep on Jan. That dude looks like a physical specimen. So I think it's going to be a good fight. But, yeah, give me a late TKO, perhaps a decision. And
for those who perhaps aren't familiar with Jan Blachowicz, his past 4 opponents have been ex-UFC fighters, so he's obviously fought on a high level. Once again, I'm picking a little bit different. I actually have Ilir by submission.
Oh, okay.
Probably second round, I think, maybe third. Moving on, co-main event. Akira Kurosani, who was supposed to fight Korean Zombie Chan Sung-jung, got injured. Now he's replaced by Max Holloway. John, what do you think about this fight?
I think this is a great fight. You know, this is one, obviously, you know, Akira Kurosani, the Swede, Max Holloway, the long Hawaiian, the youngster, man. Still amazing to think how young he is and what he's already accomplished in the UFC. I'm going to take Max Holloway in this one. I think he's a little bit smoother of a striker. Obviously, he has the reach advantage as well. And Akira just has a tendency to put himself in bad places and get clipped. I love it because he always puts himself in a great fight. You know what I mean? I think this is going to be a fight of the night type candidate. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But I think Holloway is going to get the TKO. Could go as early as first round, but probably second round. But I think this is going to be one of the most exciting fights on the card.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but when Max Holloway steps into the octagon on Saturday night, he will be the youngest UFC fighter ever to have 10 pro UFC fights under his belt. So for such a young age, 22 years and 8 months. That's incredible. That's incredible. He's got so much experience under his belt. And I think, you know, suffering that loss to McGregor, he changed things around, and, you know, he's had a few things going on in his personal life this year, which he's had to deal with. And I think that, you know, focusing on the fight game, he's been fighting very consistently this year, and he just keeps getting better and better. And I have to agree, I think we're going to see a great performance by him, very technical, and I see a knockout coming from him as well.
And this could be a really big night for Max Holloway. You know, I think what's funny is he's had a great year. He's 3-0 this year already. Three finishes. He could go 4-0 with 4 finishes. But honestly, I think what people know him most for is the guy that lost to Conor McGregor.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think this could be a big statement in a co-main event, you know, in a card that is getting some attention in Europe, obviously a little bit of attention at home, but a high-profile fight for him. If he's able to pick up another stoppage win, go 4-0 with 4 stoppages in a year, I mean, that's fight of the year type candidate material. Absolutely. So this could be a big statement for Max Holloway. I'm going to guess you picked The Swedish guy, Kyrosani. Am I right?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
You picked the Kyrosani.
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, they're both very entertaining fighters. Holloway is a very entertaining striker. He has had problems on the ground. He is prone to getting taken down. And while I don't think Kira will be able to finish him, I do think he will be able to do enough to win a decision.
What I have to say about Akira, though, is he seems really focused coming off a loss. He seems like, he talked about how, he didn't listen to his coaching staff the last time because he was going into that fight with a training mask to kind of prevent that.
Couldn't even spar, he said.
Exactly, right? So I think now that that's all out of the way, hopefully, for him, I think we'll see a better performance out of Akira, but I still don't think that's going to be enough to defeat Max Holloway.
And I think a lot of people forget that he had a lot of great moments in the first round against Dustin Poirier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that he himself said to me that he said he felt he had Dustin in a little box in the first round. So we'll see if he can perhaps get the Hawaiian into that box. Now, one thing I wanted to bounce off you was you said how Max Holloway is the very much remembered as a fighter who lost to Conor McGregor. In a similar way, Ilir Latifi is kind of remembered as the guy who lost to Gegard Mousasi. What do you guys think it's going to take to get away from that label of the guy who lost to?
I think an impressive performance here. I mean, he's already starting to get that. To be honest, I honestly believe he's already moving past that. I think he's shed that tag. I think 2 legitimate, impressive performances and victories have started to get that away. Now, had he lost a second time and been cut from the organization, never to be heard from again, he'd have it forever. But he's picked up 2 wins and proven that he, was in a bad spot the first time around, did what he could do to get in the UFC. As you know, I mean, when the UFC comes calling, you can't say no, even if it's a horrible situation. You don't know if that phone call is ever coming again. So you have to do it. I think he's already started to move past that, to be honest with you. I really do.
I think with Ilir, more than any other Swedish fighter on this card, I think he really wants to win on Saturday night, especially at the Globe Arena, because his UFC debut was in this arena, in front of all the Swedish MMA fans, and it didn't go his way that night. And I think he's got that itch in him to show everyone, you know what, I can do this, I can fight, I can win in front of my own people, and I think that's going to give him the extra added motivation to get the job done on Saturday night.
I think you're completely correct. Now, moving on to the main event. Gunnar Nelson, first time in Sweden, first time out of 3, but nevertheless, first time in Sweden that a non-Swedes are holding the main event. Iceland's Gunnar Nelson is taking on America's Rick Story. Sandu, what do you think about the main event?
Well, I have to say, Gunnar Nelson's typically hard to read, but I have to say he's opened up a lot to all of us throughout fight week. I think he's really become comfortable with this main event slot. It feels like it's home to him. It feels like this is his maybe 5th or 6th main event slot. I don't think anything's got to him. Nothing's phasing him about this fight or headlining his first UFC main card. He looks so confident. I think all the guys coming out of the SPG team, they keep winning, and it keeps giving the other fighters more and more motivation and confidence. And I can't see anything but a Gunnar Nelson win on Saturday night. Can you?
Not really, no. I mean, admittedly, I think people are counting Rick Story out, and unfairly so. Like, Gunnar Nelson himself said that Rick Story's win over Johnny Hendricks shall not be forgotten and should not be forgotten.
That was a horrible fight, by the way. I mean, he does have, that's a great bragging right to have, but if you haven't seen that fight or it's not fresh in your memory, go back and watch it. It was terrible. Still, though, statistically, he still is one of the only ones aside from George St. Pierre to have a victory over the current welterweight champion. But John, your pick. Well, I think one thing that you said I definitely agree with is that people are writing off Rick Story a little too soon here. I think Rick Story is a tougher guy than most people are giving him credit. A lot of power, a lot of aggression, and he does have the skills and the tools to win this fight. That said, I don't see it being done. I've got to go with Gunnar Nelson as well. Gunnar Nelson is the real deal. As you said, very, very comfortable. Something John Kavanaugh told me this week that Gunnar and Conor both share is the ability to just not to take in the moment and be able to perform the same way they do in the gym in front of millions of people. They don't get rattled, they don't get shaken. And it's funny because we think of this kind of stoic personality in Gunnar Nelson, and we're starting to find out that's actually not who he is. He's a joker, and we
got
really
to see a glimpse of it at the open workouts
with a little sword play. So we're starting to get to see the personality. But I think that still describes who he is as a fighter. Just icy cold, doesn't get nervous, and I think. the other thing is that Rick Story's aggression might ultimately pay against him because, you know, Gunnar likes to play that counter role and likes to bring somebody in. Rick's going to go right there. And if Rick isn't feeling good on the feet, he's got great wrestling, but, man, I don't know if you want to be on the ground with Gunnar Nelson, especially for 5 rounds. You know, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to get tapped out there. So I think this is a good fight. I think it's a good test for Gunnar Nelson, whether people really see it or not with Rick Story. I think it is a great test. And I think, honestly, this is Gunnar Nelson's kind of coming out party. I think this is the moment that people are really going to start to realize it. I think his next fight, not to take him away from you guys over here, but I think he's got to go to Vegas. You know, I think we exposed him to the American audience, so he's been fighting in Europe, and I think he's flying under the radar a little bit. You know, so not only are his fights flying under the radar, but because he is so soft-spoken and, as he admits, a little bit of a quiet and shy person, he's just not getting the headlines. I don't think he's getting the respect he deserves. So I think this is a big moment. If he has an impressive performance here, I think it's going to be a huge opportunity for people to realize he's the real deal, and then I think you got to take him to Vegas for the next one. And it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to say you're riding Conor McGregor's coattails, but it doesn't hurt that your teammate is garnering all these headlines and doing what he's doing. I think he's bringing attention to the gym, obviously, and I think, you know, I asked Gunnar about it. He said, listen, I'm never going to try to be Conor. That's Conor. I'm a totally different person, but it doesn't hurt to get a little bit of that attention that'll maybe shift onto you a little bit.
And let me get your, which way does Gunnar Nelson win tomorrow night?
Submission in the first round.
Whoa.
Early finish. Yeah, I think he's going to tap him out as well. Honestly, first round wouldn't surprise me because I think Rick pushes the pace so well. There's not going to be a big feeling out process. I'm going to go a little bit later, maybe second round. But yeah, I think it's just going to be too tough for Rick Story on the ground.
You guys' picks are the same, and mine, or when it comes to win method, and mine has always been different. I'm actually going to go...
Because we know what we're talking about.
We'll see a Saturday night who buys the drinks. I'm actually thinking that Story is such a tough fighter to finish. I think he's one of the most hard-nosed, aggressive fighters out in the division, and I actually think that he's going to be able to last 5 rounds. I do, however, think that Gunnar Nelson is going to get more and more dominant as the fight goes, and I think we'll actually be applauding Rick Story at the end for showing a tremendous amount of heart. But I should think he'd last 5 rounds.
I can see that happening. I see what you're saying. I can see the fight playing out that way in some way. And honestly, it wouldn't be a horrible thing for him to get 5 rounds of action in there.
Exactly.
You know, but I mean, I think an impressive finish early on would do a lot more towards elevating his status. But it wouldn't be bad for him to get, you know, more cage time. And I think you're right. I think you're definitely right. If it does go late, I think it definitely favors Gunnar at that point.
And I'll tell you what, if Gunnar Nelson does win, that breaks him right into the top 10 of the welterweight division, in my opinion. And I think you're right, John. I think he needs to go to Vegas for his next fight, if he does win. And I don't think maybe the Conor McGregor style suits him, and no one wants to really see shtick from fighters. They want fighters to be genuine, who they are. And I think, you know, there's something about Gunnar Nelson, something a little Fedor-esque about him, you know. And I think as long as he keeps performing and winning the way he does, that'll be enough to create that mystique and get that pay-per-view feeling about him, that you want to pay to watch this guy fight, rather than, you know, be forced to or be encouraged to see him fight or pay to watch him fight just from hype and trash talk before a fight.
Now, we're all reporters. We've all been doing interviews all week. One thing I want to know is, what has been your guys' favorite interview so far that you've done?
I have to say it's got to be Akira Kurosani. Yeah, I mean, Akira, I have to say, you know, coming back to Stockholm, he's talked a lot about, you know, what it feels like to, you know, to fight in Stockholm, but he's jumped on that bandwagon of, you know, talking about Conor McGregor, and, like, you know, it's been one of the biggest hits for us this week. I mean, the guy has, you know, has talked about how, you know, Conor McGregor has been taking some lines out of Bruce Lee's, you know, playbook, and
Bruce Lee wants his quotes back.
Bruce Lee wants his quotes back, and you know, being in the featherweight division, I think it's useful for any other featherweight to try and, you know, get some hype behind him to maybe fight Conor McGregor down the road, because at the end of the day, Conor McGregor sells. You get a Conor McGregor fight, you're getting paid.
Very, very true. All right, well, gentlemen. Oh, yeah, sorry, John. Your favorite interview?
For me, I would say, honestly, Gunnar Nelson, because I really feel like we finally got to see who he is a little bit. I think he said, listen, I'm finally starting to get comfortable. John Kavanaugh told me, he's like, listen, he's starting to see, you know, the same reporters over and over. He's starting to develop a rapport, you know, feel a little bit more comfortable than he did before. And I don't know, I finally felt like I saw something in him this week and met the real guy and started to get to know him a little bit. And so seeing him kind of start to open up a little bit, that's what sticks with me.
Well, I know you guys are dying to know. My favorite interview was with Nico Musoke. But, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in Studio MMA.
Thanks,
Sandu.
Thank you. Cheers.
John.
Yeah, thanks for having me, brother.
Always a pleasure.